Good morning. My name is Jeff Phillip. I am on your board of trustees, and I would welcome you all to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church on this rainy, damp morning. Special thank you to Reverend Amanda Aikman for coming to join us this morning. I have a couple of announcements. One is that our spiritual writing group will get together on Wednesday, the 14th at 5 p.m., which I'm just recognizing is Valentine's Day, so interesting how inspired your spiritual writing might be by that day. I will also remind all of you that we are collecting offers to host events between April and October of this year. We're doing an event, hosted event sales. And in April, or in March, we're going to open up the sales for all of those items. Right now we have 6 that people have submitted. This will be our last week of collecting them, and then we'll start organizing to present them in March. So please consider hosting something fun. We've got some interesting events already in the hopper. So thank you and good morning.
Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Gregory Cook, and I'm pleased to be serving as worship associate this morning alongside our guest speaker, the Reverend Amanda Aikman. She is a retired UU minister living in Everett with her spousal unit, Nancy, and Mousehole, the world's most annoying cat. Amanda worked with our worship committee in 2017 for 6 months when we were between ministers, and she reports that she had a lovely time with us. We'll be hearing from her a little later. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious, ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. For our call to worship, I'd like to offer the last few lines of Alan Dugan's poem, Love Song, I and Thou, which is ostensibly about building a house. The first line is, nothing is plumb level or square. Here's the end. Oh, I spat rage's nails into the frame-up of my work. It held, it settled, plumb, level, solid, square, and two for that one great moment. Then it screamed and went on through, skewing as wrong the other way. God damned it. This is hell. But I planned it. I sought it. I nailed it. And I will live in it until it kills me. I can nail my left palm to the left-hand crosspiece, but I can't do everything myself. I need a hand to nail the right, a help, a love, a you, a wife. Now let us prepare for the service by listening to the prelude. During my first year of college, the 1987-88 school year, I worked washing dishes in the dining hall. I was so good at washing dishes that I was made the weekend dish room manager after only 4 hours on the job. I don't remember many of the people I worked with, but I do remember a few. There was a guy who seemed to always be moving around and doing things but accomplishing nothing. There was a high schooler who was always on time and stayed until all of the work was done, not just the end of his shift. And there was also an Indian exchange student. Standing side by side, scrubbing pots, this exchange student and I would talk about the differences between life in the United States and life in India. I was the wise one, and I was educating him about life in our country. After a few weeks, he told me that where he was from, arranged marriages were still common. And in fact, his marriage had been arranged, and when he returned home after getting his degree, he was going to be married to a woman who he had only met once. And I told him what I thought about that arrangement. That is barbaric. That is screwed up. I was 18. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story told in Fiddler on the Roof. Set in 1905 Russia, the main character is Tevye, a dairy farmer who is trying to maintain his religious and cultural traditions. He's Jewish. As the story progresses, his daughters push back more and more against these traditions. His oldest daughter, Zeidel, doesn't want to marry the wealthy butcher who the matchmaker has set her up with. She wants to marry a childhood friend who is now a poor tailor. Another daughter, Hodel, gets engaged first and only tells Tevye later, saying, "I'm not asking for your permission, I'm asking for your blessing." A younger daughter then marries someone who isn't even Jewish. Tevye is trying to understand the changing times, and he talks to his wife, Golda. Their marriage had been arranged. Their daughters are choosing to marry the men they love, while Tevye and Golda never had a choice. At one point, Tevye sings to Golda, "Do you love me?" And she responds, "Do I what?" And Tevye asks again, "Do you love me?" And she responds, "You're a fool." This duet goes on, and finally she sings, "For 25 years I've lived with him, fought with him, starved with him. 25 years, my bed is his. If that's not love, what is?" And then Tevye says, "Then you love me?" And she says, "I suppose I do." And he says, "And I suppose I love you too." And then together they sing, "It doesn't change a thing, but even so, after 25 years, it's nice to know." So going back to the dish room and me telling that exchange student that his culture was screwed up, he gave me a different perspective. He said, "Here, you marry the person you love. Where I'm from, you love the person you marry. Love isn't a feeling you feel, it's a decision you make." And that sounds like it could be a Unitarian Universalist definition. I dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to making the choice to love. Please join with me in repeating our affirmation as printed in your order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
All right. right. So our opening hymn is number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. If you'd like to join me in standing, as you would like.
So today our time for all ages is going to be a little different because I have no content. So what we're going to do is we are going to extract knowledge, or extract wisdom from all of you. And we're going to do this by slowly going through and asking people for advice on relationships. Wow. So, as you know, the success of this time is going to be up to you. If it's a failure, it's not my fault. Okay, so I want you to raise your hand if you are not currently married. Oh, if you are not currently married. Nope, not currently married. Sorry, leave your hands up just for a moment. I would like to ask any of you what advice you would have for relationships. Volunteers? Mary?
Kindness to each other.
Kindness to each other. Liz?
Make sure you're with someone who helps you laugh.
Ask questions and listen to the answers.
Remember that your relationship is an ongoing process and both people have to work at it lovingly.
Life on your own can be great.
Don't let yourself wander from the person that you chose too far away. And when they wander away from you, do your best to stay connected.
Peter?
Bathe.
Okay, so now I would like you to raise your hand if you have been married for, say, less than 25 years.
Don't take the temperature of your relationship too often.
Don't spend too much on a wedding. You don't know how many you're going to need to have over the course of your lifetime.
Okay.
I've been married 3 times, so I had to do math. My advice would be to listen to the fear before you jump in. And if you feel it, listen to it. Yeah.
Okay, raise your hand if you have been married for 10,416 days. It's about 28 and a half years. I think it applies to 2 people in the room, Arlene and... Arlene, would you like to say something? Okay. Raise your hand if you've been married longer than that. Longer than what? 28 and a half years. Okay, so now I want to go kind of in order. Like, I want to go for the people who have been married longest last. So, okay, let's go for under 35 years. Would you guys like to?
If you get into, when you get into a situation, I'd advise not starting that situation by saying, if this doesn't work out, it's not my fault.
Remember, you're marrying your partner's family.
All right, how about between 35 and 45 years? Do you want to say something? Okay.
Make clear your personal needs. You know, I always expected my husband to be perfect, and you know, if I went out and taught a workshop somewhere in Seattle, and you know, needed his tending, you know, I always came home to an uncooked meal, and you know, I had to make it for myself, and I was like, can't you like just do it for me? But I actually had to ask him for that. You know, you can't expect your partner to know what your needs are. You have to be really clear about it sometimes. So.
Two, there are no fairy tales. And second, I love my wife, but I don't always like her.
Okay, how about between 45 and 55 years?
Well, even though I've been married for 48 and a half years, this is actually my second marriage. And I learned a lot more from my first marriage. First marriage taught me that love grows on respect, and I got that the second time.
All right, I think now we can just open it up to people who have been married for a long time. I'm going to go with Dean first, because this is his second time.
Pat and I were married for 56 years, and one of the important things that we both learned is we can't read the other person's mind. You have to speak up if you want to be understood.
Who else would like to go? Sandy?
Jean and I have been married for 66 years. That'd be 67 in August this year, and known each other for 68. So all I can say is it's something you always keep working on, and basically it needs to be a loving partnership.
Richard.
We've been married 59 years. I want to say, realize that you have become part of each other.
I thought I was married the longest in this group, but that was not true. I've only been married for 61 years. And the advice in this room is incredible. It's really all spot on. And the one thing I'll add is don't make a big deal out of small things.
Okay, so that concludes our time. Thank you for giving this advice to our children.
It's perfect. Thank you. Hello. Since the last time I was with you, I've developed a bit of wobbliness, so Gregory's my helper today. So I loved that. I loved getting everybody's advice. It was just terrific. So please let's come together in a moment of prayerful meditation or meditative prayer. Universal Spirit of love, divine force within each one of us, whose power reaches to the stars, whose love connects us one to another and to all creation, remind us that we are one. We cry out with the pain of this broken world. With all our capacity for love, we ask, why can't we wrap this world in love and bring healing? We confess that we're not always able to express the love that we know is inside us. We feel constricted and hesitant sometimes, afraid that our love will be rejected or misused. We pray for forgiveness, that we may first of all forgive ourselves for our mistakes that were made in fear or ignorance. Help us let go of fear so we can move on, opening our hearts to one another. We pray for empowerment, that we may learn to love more fully. Let love shine forth from this sacred place, that others may know that here they will find freedom, community, and love. We give thanks for the blessings of love in our lives and for the chance we have to love again and always. May we feel the love inside us, connecting with the love in each other and in the stars. Amen. Blessed be.
On many Sundays, we set aside some time for the sharing of joys and sorrows. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like to share, please come forward, state your name, and in a few brief sentences, share your joy or sorrow. For a joy, pour a little water in the bowl so that we may all be buoyed up. And for a sorrow, place a stone in the bowl so that we may all share your burden. And remember that this part of the service is neither live streamed nor recorded. place a final stone for all of the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, held delicately in our hearts.
So let's sing together Spirit of Life, number 123. The recording apparently plays through twice. So.
Sunday mornings at Cedars, we open our ears to the song. Sunday morning at Cedars, we all open our hearts. Here we attempt not to fear change, and of course, we come in and rejoice. We don't have a large foundation. We support ourselves with contributions from people like you. And there, instead of people like you, I could say we support ourselves with contributions from you. If you are visiting for the first time, please feel free to let the baskets pass you by. You are our guest, and we are happy simply that you are with us today. Would the ushers come forward to collect the offering? Thank you for your gifts.
Thank you. All right. I'm so glad I came today. I loved your joys and sorrows, and I usually can't stand joys and sorrows. It was really beautiful, and all the advice, of course, and the music. Thank you. The first reading is from Our Town by Thornton Wilder. This is at the end of the play when Emily, the young woman who has just died, gets her wish to go back into her life and relive a single day of her life. Oh, Mama, just look at me 1 minute as though you really saw me. Just for a moment, now we're all together. Mama, just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it every minute? The second reading is by Brian Swim. This is the greatest discovery of the scientific enterprise. You take hydrogen gas and you leave it alone, and it turns into rose bushes, giraffes, and humans. You just take hydrogen, leave it alone, and it turns into a human. That's a pretty interesting piece of information. The point is that if humans are spiritual, then hydrogen's spiritual. It's an incredible opportunity to escape the traditional dualism. You know, spirit is up there, matter is down here. Actually, it's different. You have matter all the way through, and so you have spirit all the way through. So in the readings. Imagine, if you will, our great poet, Walt Whitman, that sensual and spiritual gay American, sitting in a Brooklyn park on a summer day in the early 1850s. He's a robust fellow in his 30s. Whitman idly plucks a blade of grass and sits and contemplates it, looks at it deeply as though for the first time. And he has a soul-stirring revelation, which he later integrates into one of his euphoric, psychedelic poems, a poem that would revolutionize American verse, Song of Myself. Looking at that leaf of grass, he has a profound intuition about his deepest origins and relations. He writes, I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. So he evidently has a mystical, intuitive knowing that a star gave birth to the elements that eventually assembled themselves into Walt Whitman. So we could speculate that Walt Whitman had a deep memory of where he came from. And he also had a mystical insight that no creature is greater or more valuable than any other. A leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. A few lines later, in an ecstatic state of oneness with all the things of the cosmos, he sees that he contains all the elements and all the manifestations of life. In this short passage, I have to explain two words in this short passage. One is the word that's pronounced nice is spelled G-N-E-I-S-S, gneiss, the metamorphic rock. And esculent means edible. I find I incorporate nice, coal, long-threaded moss, fruits, grains, esculent roots, and am stuccoed with quadrupeds and birds all over. Isn't that fabulous? Stuccoed with quadrupeds and birds all over. I picture Walt Whitman in a chunky, earthy suit made of mosses and rocks with raccoons and robins marching along to the music of birdsong. If indeed Whitman had a mystical insight into his deep origin in the stars and his essential oneness with all of creation, he was scientifically accurate. It has unfortunately become almost a cliche to say that we are made of star stuff, that our origins in deep time go back to the emergence of the universe. How can we grasp that truth afresh and greet it with all the amazement it deserves? Right now, just before Valentine's Day, it might be a good time to look at love, as you guys have done so beautifully this morning, to take a look at committed relationships. As you know, it is proposed that we, Unitarian Universalists, rewrite our principles and purposes that as we do that, that we put love at the center. I think that's great. I think that's great, though I would prefer the concept of compassion to be at the center of our faith. Compassion, which means to suffer with, to love something or someone, knowing it will die, it will pass away, and loving it all the more intensely for that knowing. Dr. Brian Swimme, our contemporary evolutionary cosmologist, says poetically, "I think that gravitational attraction is an early form of compassion or care. If there weren't that kind of care at the foundation of the universe, there would be no formation of galaxies, and we wouldn't be having this discussion." So we might say that the closeness of a committed relationship reminds us of the original nature of the universe, compassion and care. As galaxies formed and the earth cooled, life emerged. Maybe the earliest life forms cared for each other, but there's no way to tell how, say, bacteria cared for each other. They replicated, but probably not a whole lot of sentiment was involved. Fast forward to 220 million years ago, as mammals emerge, and there's a genetic mutation in some species that causes mother and child to bond. Because of that bond, the offspring have a higher chance of surviving. Then bonds develop between siblings, and they have a higher chance of survival. Before too long, that mutation spreads through the whole population, and the species grows stronger. Compassion comes into the world. Primates care for one another in their troop. Finally, human beings come onto the scene, and we are the first species that has the possibility of caring about other species because of our imagination. As Dr. Swimme puts it, the human being is that space in which the comprehensive compassion that pervades the universe from the very beginning now begins to surface within consciousness. We didn't invent compassion, but it's flowing through us, or it could. You've probably noticed that Brian Swimme works and lives in California. Think about caring for those closest to you. Thinking about those who have been or are now closest to you. Picture their faces. Let one face come into your consciousness. Perhaps you pictured a dear friend or a parent or a sibling or a child, or perhaps whether you're currently partnered or not, perhaps you thought about a romantic partner, maybe one in the past or in the present, or someone you hope to be partnered with in the future. And whether you're single, widowed, divorced, or in a polyamorous arrangement or some other creative family setup, the couple, the pair, is the predominant model for adult relationships throughout human history and throughout cultures. And chances are good that you've been in a one-on-one relationship with another adult person at some time in your life. Why is the couple the predominant model? Why, for many of us, is the romantic sexual partner the first person who comes to mind? Well, the couple model has been reinforced by social and religious pressure throughout the centuries in most cultures, hasn't it? Yes, but why? Whose bright idea was this? To build our civilization on the idea of the romantically bonded couple. Well, I've noticed that whenever someone is really flummoxed by some issue around human behavior, especially when humans are doing things that are illogical or incomprehensible, a pretty dependable explanation, you can try this on your own, is to say, well, we're primates after all. I think that relieves a little bit of the tension sometimes. Well, we're just primates. And whatever this is, it must have served an evolutionary purpose. We tend to think we're a very special species, and a lot of our problems come from not remembering that, as Whitman implied, we're no better than any other living being. Why is the monogamous couple our model, our main model for relationships? Whose bright idea was it? Goodness knows it's not a flawless model. Monogamy is a challenging ideal for us. If it were easy, we wouldn't have the blues or opera, all the drama, pain, and upset due to human beings' sexual and romantic restlessness. And yet we keep on trying. In all the 200 plus weddings I've officiated, people promised that they would be faithful for life. Now, most of the weddings I've done were for people I never saw again, so I almost never knew what happened to those promises. But swept up in the emotions of the wedding day, I too believed almost every time that the marriage would last forever. Some years ago, I did a gorgeous wedding at the Victorian Valley Chapel on Lopez Island. The day was sunny and warm. The little chapel, it's at the bottom of this tiny little valley, this tiny little chapel. There were only 5 guests. The couple were beautiful, sophisticated, smart. It was like being in a movie. The groom, Hans, who was German, was especially charming as well as very, very handsome, and the bride was just lovely. I left Lopez Island that day, with a renewed belief in romance and love. Some months later, I bumped into the bride in a cafe in Seattle. She told me excitedly that the wedding was so fantastic that she was starting a wedding planning business. We chatted about that for a bit, and then I asked how Hans was doing, because his name hadn't come up yet. And she said, "Oh, we're not together anymore." After the wedding, I found out some things I hadn't known about him, and we split up. I must have looked aghast, because she grabbed my arm and said sincerely, "But it was the most beautiful wedding I can imagine, and I'm so glad we did it." Though we know all the statistics, how many marriages end in divorce, and yet most of us aspire or have aspired to be part of a couple, despite the painful effects of divorce and the awfulness that is dating. Most of us try to attain coupledom. Why is this such a deep-seated desire? The answer is, well, we're primates. Coupledom must have served an evolutionary purpose. I think I need some water. And indeed, for early humans, the couple pair offered the very best opportunity to pass on the genetic inheritance of the parents. The survival of our species to the present day is due largely to the genetic success of our ancient ancestors, and one of the biggest advantages they had was their inclination to form pairs. From an article in Scientific American by Blake Elgar, most human societies are organized around the assumption that a large fraction of the population will pair off into enduring, sexually exclusive couples. And monogamy seems to have done our species a lot of good. Pair bonds were a crucial adaptation that became central to human social systems and our evolutionary success. The monogamous couple also forms the basis for something uniquely human: the vast, complex social networks in which we live. Other primate young establish kinship links only through their mother. Humans trace kinship from both parents, broadening each generation's family ties. Among humans, social networks extend to include other families and even unrelated groups in widening ripples of relationships. Such group ties, along with monogamy, constitute two of the most consequential features of human society. End of quote. So it's a cliche that it takes a village to raise a child, but it's true. Our very presence here is due in large part to the fact that our ancestors, starting with Homo erectus, nearly 2 million years ago, shared the tasks of supporting infants. The human baby requires an incredible amount of care and a massive number of calories on its long, slow journey from birth to maturity. Unlike all other apes, our ancestors relied on alloparents, the kin of the mother or father or other group members, to help provide food and childcare. So it was cooperation, it was community that enabled humans to succeed when all our fossil ancestors and cousins went extinct. Our species, as flawed and violent as it is, developed community to ensure our survival. The uncles and aunties, the extended families that for millennia sustained and supported children's development all contributed mightily to humanity's astonishing success. We say it takes a village, but where are our villages today? In the Seattle area, we see this incredible amount of building going on, all these dwellings shooting up. Do they constitute villages? I don't think so. Where I live, a massive amount of housing is going up, forming what look like whole new towns, but none of them has so much as a convenience store, a cafe, a library, a grocery, all the places where in actual authentic villages, people interact and get to know their neighbors. It's probably very different here on Bainbridge Island, but I'm talking about Everett. Just got all this housing and no villages. Our society has created an immense loneliness, and with it, an intense suspicion and distrust of other people. To face the challenges of our age, our species needs to swivel away from our individualistic preoccupations, our destructive emphasis on accumulation and exploitation, and not to invent, but to remember and recreate how to live with mutually enhancing relationships. Mutually enhancing relationships, not just with humans, but with all beings, so that our activities bring more resilience and more life to our sacred domain, our earth community. We know this. We know this. I became a minister because I believed in the power of congregations to heal and sustain people, because a congregation had healed me and raised me up from despair and isolation. In our lonely society, in the midst of these villages that are not villages, can we create opportunities, invitations for our lonely and disconnected neighbors to connect on a spiritual and practical level? I think we can if we decide to and find the will and the creativity to do it. In seminary, I took a class on environmental ethics from Dr. Stephanie Kaza, a professor at UC Santa Cruz. Stephanie, a Buddhist, was very, I won't say relentless, she was very emphatic about that we should all give all creatures equal respect. She urged us to discard our species hierarchies and realize that the pigeon and the rat were as valuable as the horse and the eagle. Her conviction had been tested, Stephanie told us, when she had taken a class of undergrads to spend the night in the open under the redwoods near campus. As they all awoke in their sleeping bags with the sunrise, Stephanie felt something unusual on her upper lip. Perhaps you know what the mascot of the University of California at Santa Cruz is? Yes, touching it gingerly, she realized that it was a huge banana slug, making its slow, slimy way across her face. Surrounded by her students, and mindful of her sincerely held convictions about the sacredness of all beings, Stephanie had to overcome her instinct to scream and throw it away from her. She very gently removed it and put it onto a nearby patch of moss to resume its life in peace. So every living thing is our kin. Walt Whitman saw this instinctively, and now we know that we are connected by our genetic heritage to every living thing. What if we lived in such a way that we truly felt the reality that our kinship relationships extend far, far beyond our nuclear families? What if we lived in such a way that our closest relationships were truly tended to with our full awareness? When I was in high school and read Our Town, I was so moved by Emily's journey back from the grave to her one day back in her life with her family in her town. I was so moved by her tragic, shocked observation that no one was really seeing each other. It motivated teenage me to actually look at my parents and siblings, and I did several times. Our 20-year-old cat, Mousel, is gradually fading, sleeping longer hours, complaining more about aches and pains. And knowing that our time with her is limited, we cuddle her more, turn on the fire for her, feed her little bits of salmon and chicken, admire her, notice every little triumph. Your fur is so shiny today. You're so fluffy. You got up on the couch all by yourself, we say. People should be so lucky. The people we live with should be so lucky. The people and creatures we see every day should be so lucky. My definition of spirituality is the experience of connection with something greater than the self that is worthy of reverence. When we touch, when we connect with someone deeply, lover, spouse, child, friend, even a pet or wild animal, we may catch a glimpse of something so much bigger than ourselves that we tremble with its power. When we don't have words for it, it may be because we're touching something unimaginably ancient, something seated deep in ourselves and strewn throughout the cosmos. That first imperative from before we were even conscious, the imperative that said, long before there were words, said connect and survive. The imperative that, if we respond to it with all our hearts, might yet radiate from our closest relationships out to our congregation and out to other communities, on and on, might contribute to creating a new way of living on earth based on mutually enhancing relationships with all beings. And maybe the way to begin is simply to truly notice those who are closest to us and our fellow church members. Really notice them as if for the first time. Perhaps, do you have coffee hour after service? Perhaps that would be a good time to practice noticing how shiny they are today and how fluffy. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. May you be richly blessed. Thank you.
All right, so our closing hymn is the hymn of the month, which is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And when we sang it last week, I was like, wow, I have never sung this song so fast as we did last week. So I'm a little bit nervous about what's going to come out in that recording and how we're going to do. I sing with the gospel choir, and I've sung this song many, many times. So I'm used to it being kind of languid and, lovely, and also 3-part harmony. So some of those notes. So we're just going to do what we can do, I think, and do our best. And here we go. Great song.
So we will be extinguishing the chalice, and we have lost all of our tradition around sitting or standing. So do what you will, and repeat after me as we extinguish our flaming chalice. The words are, wow, escaping me after all this time. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment.
The warmth of community or the fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Blessed be. Go in peace. Great job.